Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
He's bringing in all of these other individuals. He's explaining the who, what, where, when, and why. And for all of these different reasons, I do have to deem him as credible to the narrative that he's telling. If he wanted to go ahead and take a polygraph just to test the veracity of what he was saying, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Things I remember Paula saying, he's over there laying in the grass like the snake he is. He didn't want us to see him, and that's why he was trying to conceal himself. May have been a constant harassment. I know one of the times we went out to search, we had to have the fire department on hand and standing by because he had threatened to set fire. You know, once the searchers got in there searching, he had threatened to set a fire behind us and trap us up inside of some of those areas, a wildfire. So
you are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
Hi, everyone. We wanted to start today with a big thank you to everyone who's been listening, commenting on our message boards, and for your overall support. We know that Paula, Misty, and the family and friends appreciate it, as do we.
It's because of all of you that Molly and Colt's story has spread across the globe, reaching over 40 countries in just 3 months.
Today, we're going to start off with LISA RIBACOFF, who is a professional polygraph examiner and deception analysis expert.
We had Lisa analyze the unedited recording that Paula captured from the potential eyewitness that detailed what he saw happen to Molly and Colt on July 8th, 2013.
If you haven't heard that person's testimony, we urge you to listen to episode 11, Eyewitness, prior to hearing what Lisa has to say about the veracity of his statements.
What we wanted to talk to you today about, Lisa, is with your expertise and your father's expertise and what you guys have been doing in the deception process world and weeding out deception through being polygraphers and deception analysis people. One of the reasons we wanted to contact you guys is for the fact that we had these recordings that Paula did, because Paula, and I think you are familiar with, she's the cousin of Molly Miller, who has been basically leading this investigation on her own and kind of interviewing people and recording them and getting their statements and trying to figure out really what happened to her cousin. Law enforcement at this point, they're kind of at a dead end. And they say it's an open case. They say it's a missing persons case, even though we all know they're not coming back. And we know that they were 100% killed and their bodies were disposed of. That's where we're at. And so we had you listen to the raw recordings of that witness that Paula tracked down, who she spoke to twice in jail when he was in jail over a video phone, and then once outside of jail. All the time she recorded these things. And she got some very revealing information from this person who was very close to the core group of people that we believe are responsible for Molly and Colt's death. So let's talk a little bit about what you heard on the raw tapes and give us your perspective from, you listen to people trying to deceive people every day in court, in prison, over depositions.
Let's talk about a little bit about your background, Lisa, and kind of get a sense of where you're coming from with your analysis of this.
Oh, yeah, no, of course, just so I'm not coming out of left field and being like, who is this lady and is she actually qualified to even speak on it? I'm definitely more than qualified to speak on it. I'm a licensed private investigator in addition to being an advanced trained polygraph examiner. I've been a polygraph examiner now for 12 years, and I actually currently sit on the board of directors of the American Polygraph Association. And New York State, we have our own polygraph association, to which I was actually elected president of that association. In the 12 years that I've been an examiner, I've done over, I would say probably even close to 5,000 exams, anything from infidelity cases pertaining to spousals, boyfriends, girlfriends, and cheating. And then we have the side of it with the criminal, where we test registered sex offenders for probation and parole, as well as anyone being accused of a crime. I've done field trips, as I like to call them, to Rikers Island to actually test inmates that are currently incarcerated, or any facility that has pretty much let me in. And the purpose of the exams are not only to just go ahead and conduct a polygraph to determine whether or not they did play a role and or are guilty of what they're being accused of, but also to conduct an interview to elicit information using the forensic interview techniques that I have to gain possible other information that will help their counsel or whoever's representing them to go ahead and adjudicate for their case at hand. So through the forensic interview, there's a couple of different types of formats which an individual can go ahead and utilize, such as the read technique, or there's something called the piece model, as well as just something called FAINT, which is the forensic analysis, which is an interview. And it's pretty much a scripted interview where we will ask questions, and on the basis of the response, as well as body language, choice of vocabulary, either over excessive pronouns or lack of pronouns, we can go ahead and determine whether or not what they're saying is deceptive on the basis of speech patterns.
Amazing.
Talk to us a little bit about give us some highlighted cases, or if you can give us anything perspective on some of the work you've done and how you were able to tell someone was being deceptive or lying. Give us some of the attributes.
I will tell you this, men and women lie about the same thing, but different veracities of it. So, for example, if I'm running an infidelity test, I'm going to have a woman try and downplay the amount of people that she's actually committed adultery with, whereas men will go ahead and increase that amount. When it comes down to financial crimes or motives, men will go ahead and increase the amount of money that is either missing or stolen, and women will go ahead and downplay financial interactions. There's always a topic that someone is going to lie about. It's just gender stereotypical of who lies and what about and more. But typically it happens almost on an everyday basis. There are times where I'll have a day and I'll run 4 exams, whether it's for immigration purposes or a criminal test or an infidelity, all different types of things. And I'll go home at the end of the day and say, wow, I had 4 people pass 4 different polygraphs today. And then there are other days I'll come home and say, wow, I've had all 4 people fail. Because there is a maximum of 4 exams that as examiners we're allowed to do per day, because we need to make sure that not only are we able to interview appropriately and do our jobs efficiently and to the standards that we're required to. But what people don't realize is that as an examiner or an interviewer, there's just so many times you can ask the same questions, and our bodies as examiners and interviewers get exhausted and depleted. So we need to make sure that after a certain amount of time, the body has to rest, the same way that our examinees, when we do interview them and we do polygraph them, that they're coming in adequately rested also. So there is, like I said, a specific amount of time that we have to allocate for A, each individual, as well as B, allocation for time for us to make sure that we're suitable and we can go ahead and when we say someone is not telling the truth or someone is telling the truth, that we are at our best as an interviewer and examiner to make sure that we're rendering the opinion that is factual. Overall, there's so many different types of training opportunities for examiners. I'm a private sector examiner and I have no law enforcement background. I've never been a police officer. I've never been a detective. I've never been a detective investigator. I've never been on a payroll of any police agency, either local, state, or federal. But I have had the opportunity to attend training sessions where some of these agencies are providing opportunities, such as when I attend an American Polygraph Association conference, I'm going to be sitting in on a presentation that someone from the Secret Service would be going ahead and providing. And if that's training from the Secret Service, I'm receiving training on behalf of the federal government. So I have the opportunity to go into my toolbox, as I like to call it, and reach for different techniques through all different types of trainings that I've acquired.
When you analyze a call, like the one that we've given you, a recording like that, what is the process for that?
So the process for that starts off with making sure that I have the raw, unedited version, because I need to make sure that the audio is not cut up or there's no additional commentary, because I want to hear from start to finish the entire conversation. I want to hear the ums. I want to hear the ahs. I want to hear pretty much, I guess, all the vowels anyone would possibly say. That way, that time period can be measured. And what people don't realize is that when someone goes, and they have to have a delayed response in which they're responding, I'm actually measuring that reaction time, because when someone is not telling the truth, they have to go ahead and fabricate the story in their head. And the example that I give people when they're in front of me is that I'll give them a pen, and it will have a cap, it will have the pen, it will have the ink, and I'll say, here's a pen. Now do me a favor, give me the pen back. And they'll give it back to me, and they look at me like I have 10 heads. And I said, well, you know what? This is comparable for telling the truth. It's all there. It's all put together. It's finally built, and it's a tool that you can use. And then I'll go ahead and I'll take the pen and I'll break it up into a ton of little pieces, and I'll give them all the pieces like Legos. And I'll say, here, build it back together. And they'll go ahead and they'll stumble and they'll try, and they can't figure out the order of which I broke it up into a bunch of tiny pieces. And some people will say, okay, I give up. I can't do this. And other people will go ahead and actually be able to do so, but it's going to take them an extended period of time. And the comparison for that is someone being deceptive. You have to think of the story that you're telling. You need to remember every intricate detail, the who, what, where, why, when, and how. And what people don't realize is that the smallest amount of deviation from the truth is where the deception comes out, because that's when body language comes into play, as well as speech recognition pertaining to hesitancy and delays of language and or just the cognitive processing that someone may go ahead and have.
Wow. Pretty detailed.
It's easier to tell the truth than it is to lie. And I tell all of my clients, listen, it's better that you tell the truth and we work through it and we figure out a way to move forward versus you coming to take a polygraph exam or you providing a statement and continuing to lie. Because eventually you're going to get caught. Eventually you're going to slip up. Eventually you're going to forget some major detail that was in the narrative to begin with that you're withholding now.
That makes sense. Makes sense. I have an obvious question here, and I don't know if you can answer it. And it's why do people lie?
People lie for all different reasons. And to be honest, I would love to write a book about why people lie and what they lie about. I think given the circumstances with the present day environment of social media, politics, education, standards, stigmas, I guess even mental health, if you want to throw that into the mix, that people lie because they want to be perceived a certain way by others. And the other side of that is people lie because a lot of people are not confrontational. Where, for example, I have clients, even yesterday, I had a gentleman come in to take a polygraph exam. And it was for an infidelity case. And he said to me, oh, well, I told her I did this, but I didn't do it. I said, why did you do that? I said, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're creating a situation for yourself. And you're now in my office because you chose to lie to her to begin with. I said, help me help you. What on earth made you decide to do that? And he said, I just didn't want to deal with the confrontation. I didn't want to deal with the yelling and the screaming and the headache. I said, but it doesn't always have to be like that. I said, as long as you have open communication with your spouse, who asked him to take the exam, I said, you can go ahead and have a normal conversation afterwards pertaining to what the question is. But because you lied to begin with, you didn't want to deal with the confrontation. Now you're dealing with confrontation for me. So either way, you lost.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, because you and we'll talk about a little bit of our history, because your company did some polygraph work for a film that we did. So let's talk about and how they went out and polygraphed some people that we believed were wrongfully convicted. And the one in particular where I'm talking about, who was exonerated based upon Georgetown students in 2018 that we followed for 8 months, and they were able to get out Valentino Dixon. And anybody who wants to know about Valentino Dixon's story, you can Google him. It's an incredible story. But your father went up there as part of your team, and we asked him to go because he was at that point where his 440 motion was being granted. And after 27 years, he was in prison. Everybody wanted to be sure because we all believed his story. And so your father went up there and he polygraphed Valentino. And I remember when we got the call back. The results they were exactly what we were hoping, that your father, based upon the results of the polygraph, believed Valentino Dixon was not the murderer, that he passed flying colors, in fact. So that was very rewarding for us. And obviously Valentino was able to get out. So in those criminal cases where the stakes are so high, how is that different from an infidelity case as opposed to a criminal case, like a capital murder?
Well, I think the stakes are going to be high, but there's different veracities of the stakes being high with regards to comparing a criminal versus an infidelity. Whereas someone fails an infidelity, you're possibly looking at divorce, having to lose assets, child custody issues, and there's so many little spikes to the umbrella, as I like to call it, that will come afterwards. But with regards to criminal, you're dealing with someone's life. Someone who's been sitting there for 27 years for a crime that they have been accused of over and over and over and interviewed over and over and over. And the story has not deviated. And there's a group of people that do believe in them, to the veracity of hiring our firm to go ahead and conduct the exam. I spoke to Valentino a couple of weeks ago, just casually through social media, about the projects that he's working on right now pertaining to his artwork and golf. And even to this day, he's still sending me messages saying, I'm so appreciative for you guys giving me my life back. I tell him every single time, we did not give you your life back. You have your life because you've continued to live your life and you've continued to be honest and truthful, not just with the polygraph, but with everything that you've said ever since you've been arrested. I said, it's been on the fault of improperly trained law enforcement, in addition to government officials who had gotten involved. And you are now taking control of your life again, as opposed to when everyone else took control of your life for you.
Good point.
Good point. Very good point. All right, so let's dive into the tape that we gave you, or the recording that we gave you that Paula did over like a year ago. Tell us what your thoughts are, because you heard the raw, unedited version, so you heard everything, and that's one of like 3 that we have. So tell us your thoughts and what you think this person is saying, and whether or not you think they're telling the truth.
Well, before I even address that, I want to indirectly, via you guys in the podcast, to give Paula the biggest hug from this side of the table and applaud her for all of her efforts, because she has taken on the role of being the sole investigator in this right now. And the fact that she has been able to set her emotions and feelings aside and pursue this to the degree that she has is absolutely incredible. Because I've seen situations in the past where family members did give up hope and they did just sit on their hands and they just waited and they just figured, okay, well, you know what? The victims have been declared deceased and we're just going to move on with our lives. But she is just going for it, gung-ho, guns blazing into the ring of fire, and I commend her.
Yeah, she's
Agreed.
amazing. She's never going to give up.
Oh, and you know what? I applaud her, and I wish I could, if there was something I could do to help her, I absolutely would, because this is listening to the raw footage. I remember, I called Rob right after, and I was just, the first words were just profanity, and I'm not going to choose my 4 little words right now, but I just had no words at that point other than profanity, because I was just heartbroken to hear the narrative of what he was saying. And the entire time I kept going ahead and taking notes as to what he was saying. And I was like, I agree. I believe you. I hear what you're saying. And under zero realm could I go ahead and say right now that there's nothing that he said that was deceptive at all. Meaning the fact of, I can put any amount of money on the fact that he's telling the truth pertaining to the narrative that he's giving. If I had a child, I would swear on my firstborn child, but I don't have one. So therefore, I'm just going to have to float an accidental amount of money on it to say that he's not being deceptive.
And what were the things that clued you in that he wasn't being deceptive? Give us some of the telltale signs that you look at as a professional person in your field. What were the clues?
So he had a couple of tells. The first tell was the fact that it flowed very smoothly. And when I teach continuing education seminars to either attorneys or judges or other examiners around the country, I always tell them, if it doesn't make sense, it probably is not true. And he has been able to provide so many intricate details, and he's been consistent along the way with the narratives that he's been telling either to Paula or law enforcement agencies, and there's no deviation from it. And it's very difficult for his story that he's telling Paula on the recording to go ahead and be scripted, especially, like I said, because of the consistency of the details of what he has been saying. Also, there's the hesitancy with his speech. There is none. Everything is free flowing. And the only time he's stopping in his story is because he's actively aware of Paula's emotions. And when he chooses not to make eye contact and he's putting his head down, he's taking a break in his own head and probably thinking like, you know what, do I really want to go ahead and do this? Like, it's a lot to go ahead and tell her. But she continues to be reassuring and saying, listen, I've heard it all before. There's nothing that you're going to tell me that's a surprise. I just need you to validate what I already know. And he, again, is forthcoming. He's bringing in all of these other individuals. He's explaining the who, what, where, when, and why. And for all of these different reasons, I do have to deem him as credible to the narrative that he's telling.
We feel the same way. I mean, we're glad to hear that. It's nice to be reassured by someone like yourself, but we felt that from the beginning as well. And we're just confused as to why law enforcement hasn't taken him seriously.
Well, I think the reason why law enforcement's not taking him seriously is obviously because of everything that's going on behind the scenes in the town. They don't want to go ahead and pursue this because it can open up Pandora's box, given the fact that they would have had this information a long time ago and they would be sitting on it, which can then turn into legal issues later on. Maybe they would just want to go ahead and avoid any possible litigation, or it can deal with reputation issues pertaining to specific officers that are involved, especially given everything going on with the sheriff credibility-wise. It can also, which I've seen in the media before, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it, where you have one officer that goes ahead and provides a statement or fabricates evidence pertaining to a specific case. And next thing you know, someone finds out about it. And then you have a bunch of other cases now that get overturned, or even dispositions. Inmates come out of prison because of the testimony of one individual. Yeah. So it could be a domino effect type of situation. But the fact of the matter is that that agency, pardon my French, doesn't know their head from their ass right now.
Yeah, it's confusing. It's confusing to us on why. And especially since the environment that she questioned him under, because it wasn't like she made an appointment with him. She tracked him down in the woods. So he didn't even know she was coming.
He didn't know that she was coming. He didn't have any time to prepare to fabricate anything. And he made the decision at that point with regards to flight or fight. Like, yeah, he ran a little bit, but eventually he's like, you know what? There's no reason for me to hide. I know what I know. I'm going to say what I know, and that's it. He fully cooperated. He answered all of her questions. He didn't fight back. He didn't say, no, I'm not answering this. He wasn't confrontational. He was not argumentative. And when you're dealing with confrontation and argumentative during an interview, those are usually two signs of an individual that's going to be deceptive.
In addition, he gave her, and initially he resisted in giving her the gun, which the potential murder weapon, and then he gave it to her.
Yeah, and that's a whole different ball game of a situation right there. But if he's willing to turn over the murder weapon to her, that further solidifies everything being said as to him not being deceptive. Because if he had anything to hide, or he had any involvement, no one in their right mind would turn over the murder weapon that's being used in an open investigation.
Yeah. And it's confusing. Well, we later found out that that weapon never made it to the people it needed to go to. So that was problematic right there. So it was never been tested or anything. So that's another whole ball of wax that's going on in this investigation.
Yeah, it just sounds like this is a domino effect where you think everything is just copacetic and you're getting answers, and then the cat jumps out of the bag and apparently the bag is bigger than you thought. It's just, it doesn't end. There's just so much fault on this agency, and there's just so much fault with how the investigation has been handled. And the fact that they're still trying to pretend that it's an open investigation when clearly it truly should be closed given the circumstances of the narratives being told. If he wanted to go ahead and take a polygraph just to test the veracity of what he was saying, I would do it in a heartbeat. And then we could turn the results over to law enforcement just to say, listen, he took an exam on his own free will and his validity. No one asked him to do so. In addition to the fact that your agency didn't test it. So there's no possibility of any corruption as to the results of the exam.
I think they just wrote him off because everyone who's come forward in this case has a meth problem. Most of them do. So they just write that off. But that whole community there is all powered by meth. Families, there's mothers doing it. You have people. There's a lot of people doing meth down there. But that's one of the common theme that we hear, that's why they discredited him, because he likes to tell stories and like that. We've had people calling us after that and said, well, he said he just made it all up, and that's when we said to ourselves, Cindy and I were like, hey, listen, if he says he made it all up and he wants to backtrack on this, we can set up a polygraph for him, and he can, if that's the case, then that's one way to discredit what he's saying. But why wouldn't law enforcement do something like that? Let's just say whatever he said was like an eighth true. Wouldn't they want to know if that's true?
A normal functioning agency that's not politically corrupt absolutely would. And we do it a lot where we have an individual that will come in and give a statement pertaining to a situation, and we'll run what's referred to as an evidence statement. And we'll simply ask on the exam regarding the details that are written in your statement, did you fabricate any of them? And we'll test an evidence statement as to what exactly the veracity of the narrative is, just to show the fact that everything that is written down or said has been true. Now, it can also come down to resources. When you're dealing with a small town like that and or the county, do they have the resources to have an examiner go ahead and do the actual exam? But they can go ahead and contact the state attorney's office. They can contact a bigger town in the area or one of the metropolitan cities, and they will have an examiner on staff. I mean, I can think of 3 examiners that I know personally that work in Oklahoma that could go ahead and run an exam for an agency.
That's the confusing part, because it's not just Love County. There was Carter County, because he was in a Carter County jail when she was talking to him, and then the first time. And then there was also the FBI has interviewed him as well, and the OSBI has interviewed him multiple times.
I have a question about, there's a lot of controversy about the fact that whether or not he was actually tied to a tree. Did you feel like there was any deception about that part of the story?
To say that he's tied to a tree and the details that he was giving pertaining to being tied to a tree, and considering the fact that he's going ahead and saying that the victims were also bound, I don't see there's any deception pertaining to what he was saying. There's a common factor there, and the way that he was explaining how he was restrained in addition to how they were restrained. Again, there's no deviation from details, and there's nothing that's added and or subtracted. So I don't foresee there being any deception as to anything that he said from start to finish.
So in your experience, when someone is consistent in the details, that is a sure sign that they're most likely telling the truth.
Absolutely, 100%. When there's consistency and it sounds correct, typically it is correct. Whereas if there were extenuating factors that he's bringing into it where you have to actually go and say, well, you know what, this does sound kind of weird, it doesn't sound probable, it doesn't sound possible, then that's typically when it doesn't make sense. But his entire narrative from start to finish did not ring any red flags or any bells to me as to being deceptive at all.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is when he did speak to the FBI and the OSBI, he told them a different story. And that's probably why they don't believe him. Because when you're under those, because we've had a couple of these. We've had people where Paula has found somebody who wants to talk, and instead of them just talking to her, she goes, all right, we're going to go to the police station. You're not only going to talk to me, you're going to talk to a law enforcement officer. And then once they get to the law enforcement and they get him in the chair, then they don't really have a whole lot to say, because now the circumstances and the stakes have risen. So I can only imagine that maybe that happened in this case, where he told the law enforcement, OSBI and FBI, and anybody else he spoke to, a different version than what he told Paula, because he's in the middle of the woods. He doesn't know he's being recorded. So, and Paula is someone he knows. So he's comfortable with her.
And Misty, I mean, the other cousin, he's close with her.
Very close. Close to the family.
There was no reason for him to lie to them.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the word comfort. If he's got a previous interaction with law enforcement that has not been positive, he's not going to really be forthcoming and want to cooperate with them. He's going to tell them the bare minimum just so he can go ahead and avoid any further confrontation with these agencies and or individuals. You have to keep in mind also, given the fact that the town does have a drug problem and or whatever other issues there are, and there is the political corruptness of what's going on with the agency, everyone's aware of it. So he's probably also saying to himself of, I have to pick and choose what I'm going to say, and I have to pick and choose what I'm going to say to which specific individuals, because he's trying to go ahead and assist, but at the same time, he was comfortable with Paula. He didn't know he was being recorded. If she said, oh, you're recording this entire thing and I'm getting your consent and authorization, because again, Oklahoma is a one-party state.
Yep.
Depending upon where the recordings take place, you need consent of the other person to record. She didn't need his consent. So that entire conversation was uncut and raw. He had no reason to fabricate anything he was saying to her because he had no knowledge of any recording.
Yeah. I know. It's confusing. Hopefully law enforcement's listening to the podcast, and I don't know what to do at this point with this, because it's confusing. It's all confusing on why more headway hasn't been reached. And we're hoping that behind the scenes there is. But we had one law enforcement guy who was working with us, and he's been on the podcast, and now he's back on the case, and so he can't really talk to us. So we don't really know what's going on. So what we're doing is just forging ahead with the information that Paula has found out. And it's all very damning. And it's all vetting out. And we're getting tips daily. So it's just confusing to us. What we'd love to do is, if we have some other recordings that Paula did, we'd love to run those by you as well and kind of get your opinion on that, because she's got quite a few of them.
Yeah, absolutely. You can send me over whatever you have, and I can do a deep dive again. I'll just make sure that this time I've poured a glass of wine, because the other one that you sent me was kind of a little heavy.
Yeah,
and, I'm going to definitely need some reinforcements on that one. But I think right now what it comes down to is that the agency that has custody of this case is insufficiently and inadequately doing their job, to which they took an oath to do. And something's got to get done or shaken up. I don't know if this now needs to become more of a political thing with the media, going to the media, or contacting the governor's office high up. There's different avenues that can be taken, but there's definitely a lack of appropriate police response to this whole situation.
Yeah, they just wanted to go away.
They just never thought anybody was going to care. They thought these were two druggy kids that nobody would care about. They really did. They never thought in a million years that someone like Paula would be holding the torch for this many years. They thought they can intimidate everybody and they would just go away.
Yeah, well, that's clearly not happening. And at that point, they need to wake up and realize that that's not happening, because it's not going to stop until something gets done. And something does have to get done sooner than later, because this has already been too long.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Coming up on 10 years now. Well, listen, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for
so
your expertise.
Much. Absolutely.
Yeah,
amazing.
no, absolutely.
And we really,
absolutely,
yeah, and we're really thankful that you had a chance to listen to that, because Cindy and I listened to this, and everybody who's listened to just the excerpts that we just pulled out from the podcast, and they can't believe this. They can't believe that this is not something that's moving the ball forward. And you heard the raw recording, which we didn't even release, and it's pretty damning.
This is like asking, does a bear shit in the woods? Like, let's call a spade. Like, it is what it is. Everything is here. Now do something with it. And it's almost like where an officer responds to the scene and fails to take action, and then we'll go ahead and get like an IAB investigation and get terminated for lack of police action. The entire agency needs to be held accountable for lack of police action.
Yeah. It's confusing. It's a very confusing case. It's very
heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking case. And
yeah.
On a level that I've never seen before, because of the corruption that's involved and what this family has had to go through. It's very similar to the Jennifer Kessie case, which is also heartbreaking in Florida. And what people don't understand is like these were kids, and this family is not going to just forget about them. They were just kids.
It's absolutely gut-wrenching to the fact that these individuals are elected into political office and spew so much campaign verbiage and crap to go ahead and seek this office. And then there are some people that actually believe that they're going to go in there and do the right thing. And then something like this happens, and it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, well, what happens is, what we find out is that they really run unopposed down there. That's it. They're controlling, they have the keys to the castle down there, and no one's watching them. And there's been books written about this. We were just informed about a book that was written, how many years ago, Sin?
In 1996, about the corruption in Love County. I mean, this is nothing new. This corruption.
And who wrote it?
His name is...
He was a former judge there.
His name is Judge Kevin Bacon. And he wrote it it was published in the 90s after he retired, and he was there from 1970 to the 90s. And the corruption is deep. I mean, it's deep. It's been there for a very long time. This isn't anything new. And I think it's just because of where it's located that people just kind of turn and they don't pay attention. Nobody really pays attention to Texarkana. They're in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to know? Who's going to say anything? And they're able to bully everybody that lives there. And the people that do live there, they're contacting me every day. They're like thanking us every day. Thank you for doing this, because we don't want to live in this environment anymore. We're tired of being bullied.
It's the epitome of the homecoming king who was also captain of the football team that never got out of town. And that's what's going on right now.
Yeah, because all these people, they never leave this area. Everyone is distantly related. And like, Molly is related to the guy that she got in the car with. She's a distant relative to him, to Con Nip. It's strange. Anyway, we really appreciate you talking to us. We'd love to come back to you with some more recordings and hear what you think, because that's the biggest thing, is everyone thinks, everybody gets discredited very quickly. They say, oh, they're saying this, they're saying that, they're saying it because of this, they're saying it because of that. And it's good to have someone who is a professional like yourself, who deals with this on a daily basis in deception and looks at it from a scientific point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Send me over whatever you have. I'll carve out the time and make sure that, like I said, a bottle of wine is in the fridge, ready to go. and then possibly get a therapist on speed dial after to talk about my emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
Because it's not And I really think what the listeners have to understand is that they truly are just getting snippets of what the situation is. And I'm glad to hear that on the basis of what they're hearing with these small snippets, that they are in agreement with both of you as well as me in a professional capacity. Because again, if it doesn't sound right, it's genuinely not true. And again, in this case, everything that he's saying, nothing is pointing to signs of deception at all.
Okay.
All right.
There you have it.
Thank you
Lisa.
so much, Lisa. We'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Next, we're going to talk to Brian Smith from the Oklahoma City Metro Search and Rescue Team.
Brian participated in the first search for Molly and Colt on the property where the car that Connip was driving during the high-speed pursuit was found.
He also participated in a couple other searches for Molly and Colt after that, so we're excited to talk to him.
Hello.
Hey, Brian, it's Rob Dorfman.
Hey, Rob.
How you doing? I have my wife on here and my partner in true crime here, Cindy.
Hi, Brian.
We appreciate you being on. Paul has said nothing but great things about you and your organization and how you've helped them in the early stages of his investigation looking for Molly and Colt. And so we just wanted to talk to you to find out, number one, about your organization and what you do, because anything that you do, we'd love to promote because of the fact that you're helping people who need help, and you're doing it for free for missing people, and we're all about that. So first of all, kudos to you that way.
Absolutely.
And so
we've been hearing about you for so long, so it's really nice to meet you finally.
So why don't you start off by telling us what your organization's like, and then we can kind of segue right into the searches that you helped Paula with.
Sure. So we are the Oklahoma City Metro Search and Rescue, and we're an all-volunteer organization. We offer no-cost assistance to families of missing persons and to law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And whatever it is, whether it's just a social media campaign to help locate a missing person, or requires boots on the ground, come out and search an area, or it requires canines, whatever the case may be, we try to be available to cover all those bases. For just this year, I think we've worked just a little over 100 missing persons cases this year alone.
Wow. So how do people get in touch with you? They go on your website and they just call you, or like what is the first step for you guys?
Sure. So you can go to our website and click on the Contact Us link, and it'll shoot me an email. Where we most often get contacted is on Facebook, and you can find us on Facebook with I don't know what they call it, but at OKCMSAR, and that will bring up our page on Facebook, and we have a message button there. And I have multiple people that monitor that message board, so if somebody sends a message and I'm not available, somebody else is, and if nothing else, we can start talking to these people and find out what's going on with their missing loved one.
So when you first heard about Molly Miller, what happened and how did you get involved in the case?
Well, at that time, so when we first heard about Molly Miller, I was not the leader of the team. I was just a team member, and a fairly new team member at that. And my understanding is that Klein Investigations and Texas EquiSearch, they were leading a search, and the people who were in the leadership of the OKCM knew some of the people who were involved and volunteered to come out and help. And then it got down to the rest of the team. Hey, we need help to come out and do this. And so my very first wilderness search for a missing person was Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. And since that time, we've had our ups and downs with the team. We had some leadership depart, and everybody just kind of said that I should take over. So I did. Everything we do, training-wise, new skills-wise, all of that stuff, always goes back to Molly Miller and Paula. As far as we're concerned, Molly is our family. Paula is our family. We are as invested in this case as anybody out there. And for example, when we started training cadaver dogs, HRD canines, we did that with the intent of knowing we were going to reach out to some very specific trainers in the United States who do clandestine graves and aged remains. One of the guys that we work with is Dr. Paul Martin, and he's out of Tennessee. And one of the things he does is the hero flight, and they travel overseas with their canines, helping to locate the remains of U.S. soldiers who may have been buried in an unmarked grave on a battlefield, or may have been buried, out behind a POW camp, those kinds of things, going out and searching those areas where these graves would otherwise be difficult to find. We train our canines to be able to find those things. Like I said, again, it all goes back to one day we might need this to work on Molly's case. And that's why we started doing it, so that, when Paula calls, we'll have those resources available.
So when Paula called, or was it Paula or Phil Klein who got in touch with you?
So on that very first search, I was not part of the leadership. I was just a person on the team. And up to that point, everything we had done has been, storm recovery from tornado damage and stuff like that. Before Molly, at least while I was on the team, we had never done a wilderness search for a missing person as part of a potential homicide investigation. You know what I mean? And just all of everything that was involved with Molly Miller Colt Haynes. I just got a call from the boss and was like, "Hey, we have this search out in Love County. Can you go?" Sure.
When was it? Do you remember?
Man, I think that search was right around a year maybe after she went missing. I'm not sure.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds right. So tell us when you got there, and obviously you were one of how many people that came out there, and take us through what you can remember and recall.
There was a lot of people out there. We had the folks from Klein. We had Tim Miller and his people. We had our people. We had all the people, Paula's friends and family, and the people that she brought. So there was news media and cameras. There was a lot going on that day. And at the end of the day, we also ended up having OSBI investigators come out because of some of the things that we found could potentially be involved we didn't know all the details of what kind of shoes was Colt wearing, but we found a shoe buried in the mud, and that was, we had been told that there had been a flood and there could be some potential for water movement to be moving bodies around and that kind of thing. So when we found a shoe buried and sticking out of a mud wash where water had run through and deposited all of this debris, at that point we just flag it, because if it is involved, we don't want to contaminate that evidence. And so the OSBI was called and we brought them out, and I actually took the agent out to where we had found that shoe so that they could dig that stuff out and determine whether or not it was part of the case, which I believe it turned out it was not. But had it been, we want to make sure that evidence is processed correctly so that we're not the reason somebody can't be prosecuted for a crime.
Absolutely. All right, cool. So there was that search that day, and how was it an all-day thing? Was it 2-day thing? Kind of take us through.
That one was an all-day thing. Pretty much every search we've ever done for Molly and Colt, it turns into an all-day affair, and that's just because that area out there where she potentially could be is so vast. We searched all those areas around by the wreck, I think, the first time around, and we searched all those areas that border some of the other family properties over there to the west, and all of that area and along the high fence one time. And then one of the other times I know we searched in the preserve on the other side of the high fence, where, all that game reserve or hunting preserve, whatever it is, I don't know what it is out there, but we ended up going and searching several areas of that with the Love County Sheriff.
But you didn't search anything on the NIP property?
No, to my knowledge, we have never been allowed to go on NIP property. So, and I know one of the times we were out there, I guess it's his cousin. He was literally, we're out there searching right along the fence line, and we spotted him. He was out there he just had shorts on. He was out there laying in the tall grass, watching us search and making sure we didn't even poke a head over the fence onto his property. And I know one of the things I remember Paula saying, he's over there laying in the grass like the snake he is. That's what he was doing. I mean, he didn't want us to see him, and that's why he was trying to conceal himself. But I mean, we ended up seeing him over there. It may have been a constant harassment. I know one of the times we went out to search, we had to have the fire department on hand and standing by because he had threatened to set fire. Once the searchers got in there searching, he had threatened to set a fire behind us. And and trap us up inside of some of those areas with a wildfire. So,
do you remember who that was? Was that Colby or Con or
Colby? Yeah, Colby.
Colby Barrick.
What did you think about that? Did it feel suspicious?
Well, I mean, it points to what we already know is that the whole family's involved and they're all covering up for one another. I mean, if you have nothing to hide, then if my cousin was a suspect in a crime and the cops said, well, we think he might have hid the body on your property. Hey, you're my cousin and all, but I ain't going to prison for you. Come on and search it. If you have nothing to hide, then you should have no reason to object to some folks coming and just walking or a canine coming and sweeping the area. It's non-invasive. It's not like our dogs are going to come in there and tear everything up. Our dogs are going to come, they're going to walk, they're going to sniff. And if they smell something, they're going to give an alert on that area. It just boils down to, obviously, you're involved and obviously, and for me at the time, it just made us want even more to get on his property. Oops, I let my dog out to pee and it ran over your fence, but hey, it's a cadaver dog and they're giving an alert to that area over there beside your house. What's going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but that would get a dog shot out there. So we just have to do everything by the book on this because they are snakes and they're going to slither away if you give them an opening. Everything has to be by the book, by the book, by the book. So again, we're not the reason that a murderer walks free.
Absolutely. Have you ever encountered that kind of resistance before when you're doing searches?
Not to the degree of the Nip family, no. We've had some situations where people have said, "Oh, we already searched that. You don't need to search it." Well, if you told me you already searched it and it doesn't need to be searched, that's my first inclination to go search that. We've always been able to, with the cooperation of the police or with the cooperation of the property owners or whatever the case may be, we've always been able to get in those places every other time. It's this particular case that just everybody on the family is so animate. No, you're not coming on our property. Absolutely no way, no how. So it just tells me that they're guilty, because if you're not guilty, you shouldn't have anything to hide. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's our whole point in doing this. Because if you're not guilty, wouldn't you want to clear your name? Number one. Number two,
I would think.
There's missing people. These are people's loved ones. Shouldn't be thrown out with the trash.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, among these junkies and these drug dealers and these traffickers, the value of a human life is very, very little. We have several missing persons cases that we believe are involved in. I know law enforcement has recently uncovered some stuff, and we think that some of the missing persons cases that we are working are possibly involved in this criminal underworld gang hit thing where these gang leaders from the prison are calling hits on these people on the outside, and these people are coming and killing them. And true story, we had a case that we were working in eastern Oklahoma, and we had gone through and searched several areas with the police and the sheriff's office, and that, searched some of these areas in this town, and nothing was located. And then after we searched that, a few days later, the body of the missing person, I say the remains of the missing person that we were looking for, just happened to be right out in the middle of this area that we searched with the sheriff's office. So we know we didn't miss it. The sheriff knows we didn't miss it. We know that somebody took that body from where it was and moved it to where we found it after we had already searched that area. And we're talking about weeks old, decomposing human remains, where it's just mostly tissue and fluid and bone, and just very, very nasty. I can't imagine, having to move something like that without the technology of body bags and, and all the things that the medical examiner's office have to contain that kind of a mess. And that's what it is. It's a mess. But some bump junkie for a dime bag or whatever, it is of meth, these people told them, hey, you need to go and gather this body from where it is and go put it over here and we'll give you some dope. And the power of the dope is so great that this person went and did that. You know what I mean? Just an average Joe who knows nothing about forensics or science or medical, any of that death, any of that stuff, went up and gathered up this bone and tissue and this blob of yuck and transported it and left it where they were told to leave it. So it proves my point that these folks will do anything for some drugs.
Yeah.
Up to and including, moving, decomposing human remains, the nastiest, when it's the nasty of the nasty, the worst of the worst. And that's when they moved it. So if you'll do that, you'll do anything.
So you're not surprised at all about what has gone down there in Love County at all?
No, not at all. This is going on everywhere. These people who are dealing the drugs, if they want you dead, you're going to be dead for whatever reason, whether you crossed them, whether you witnessed something you weren't supposed to witness, or whether you owe them money. And that's the other one. Back in the day, if you owed the mob money, you might be in fear of taking a beating and getting hurt, but you didn't have to worry about them killing you because they wanted their money. So if they killed you, they were never going to get their money. Not these guys, not these drug lords. It doesn't matter. If you owe them money, they will still kill you and write that money off because the business is so lucrative. You know what I mean? They're going to make that money back somewhere else. So they're not even concerned about sparing you long enough to get paid back. If you get on the wrong side of these guys, they will kill you. Mm-hmm. And it's just as simple as that. And, we've even been threatened by some of these people and that you need to stop what you're doing. You don't need to find that body. Well, unfortunately, yes, we do. You know what I mean? That person has a family who loves them, who cares about them. And whether they're dead or alive, that family would at least like to have a grave to go to and to know my loved one is interred at this cemetery, and anytime I want, I can go to this cemetery and I can sit by them and I can talk to them and I can feel close to them and I can have those moments with them. And when a missing person's body is never recovered, that family is denied all of that time, all of that being, all of that expression. I try to never use the word closure, because closure is, it's a good talking point, but it never really happens.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I mean, even if we were to find Molly tomorrow and have her funeral next week and know where she is, there's still no closure. Even if Khan is convicted and goes to prison for it, there's still no closure because Molly's gone.
Yeah.
That wound may heal, but it never goes away. Their scars are there for a reason, and that's to remind us what we went through. And even once there's healing, that scar that everybody has on their heart from losing Molly it's going to be there.
How do you guys protect yourself? You guys aren't peace officers, you're not law enforcement. Like when you're dealing like a situation like that, I would imagine some of these times you have law enforcement with you, but a lot of times you don't.
Yeah, I can tell you at one point, I know Colby had threatened to shoot any of us. We were on a search out there, and he had threatened to shoot any of us that he saw. And so, I tried to make sure that I was always going to be on the side where if he saw anybody, he would see me first. And I had on body armor, and I searched in body armor all day that day. We are all law-abiding gun owners. As for me personally, I have a protection canine in my house. I have a 90-pound Belgian Malinois. He doesn't like people. It took a long time to build that trust between him and I, but if somebody comes in this house, I pray for their soul because Ivan will rip their throat out.
Those are great dogs.
They're beautiful dogs.
They're really great dogs. Can you just give us a little bit of it's hard for people to understand the area that you were searching, and if you could kind of give us a little bit of a direction on where it was and how many times you were out there?
For the most part, it's south of Oswalt Road between Long Hollow and Pike. I believe is the primary area where they turned off the main road and then cut onto farmland and then started busting through gates out there. But to the best of I don't know that I'm not super familiar with the area.
Yeah.
I can tell you where a lot of those things are just from memory in my head. But like I said, it's Oswalt Road and south of that. And then Long Hollow Road is the border on one side and Pike Place.
It's where they dumped the car. Not far from there. How many times were you out there?
First one, the second one, I think 3 times there, and then 1 time on the other side of the high fence out on that hunting preserve, whatever it is.
Now, I mean, you guys have a really high success rate. So my question is, you've been out there that many times and you haven't found anything. What do you think happened? I mean, do you have a theory, or do you think that it's possible that they could still be out there, or you think that you guys have exhausted that?
To be honest with you, I think something happened somewhere. We know that Molly walked and made that phone call, and she said on the voicemail or whatever it was that Colt had tried to climb a tree to see where he was and fell and broke his foot. We know that, and she went back to him. That's where, when she left, she went back to where he was. And I think Con, just to cover himself, killed them because now they know he's involved, whatever it was. And I'm sure there's drugs involved and all of that too. So he just killed them because, again, the value of a human life is nothing to these people. And I think that the bodies may have been left where they were for a short time, but I really feel like that they're either on Colby's property over there, because it was nearby to where all of this happened. And for the most part, criminals are lazy. One of the things that we train is, if the story is that they got out of the car and took the body and dumped him in the woods, it's not going to be very far into the woods, 20, 30, 40 feet, 100 feet at the most, just because it's not easy to carry and move a dead body unless you have help. But for the most part, I think that they would want to get them wherever they were going to get them, and get them covered up and buried, whatever they were going to do, and make sure that it's on property that is not going to be subject to a search warrant. Con didn't live there. You know what I mean? That was Colby's property, or whoever's it was at the time. It wasn't Con. So even if Con was a suspect, they couldn't get a search warrant on that property without probable cause. And at the time, the sheriff was in their pocket. So I feel like that they knew that they had a little bit of time to play with, as far as with the musical chairs of whatever they were doing.
Yeah, well, they had a lot of time. And I just want to correct you, because Colby was living on the Nip property, so he wasn't his property. He's a cousin, and he was living on their property on a trailer. So I just want to clarify that.
Right. So, but the property that's on, I think, Long Hollow, at the south end of Long Hollow, there was a property that was right on the road, and then we came in where the oil field or where the oil equipment was, and then we searched back towards that property and ended up right along the back fence of that property right there, and that's where we ran into Colby at that time. So I don't know whose property that was, but I feel like the property that they have most closely protected from us is the property where something is at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we believe too.
Did you check the oil fields?
Yeah, all up and down that lease road, along the backside of it, along the power line cut that runs down through there, all of the ponds, the little ponds, the big ponds. We've ran dogs out all along on the hunting preserve, some of our dogs and dogs from other canine teams that we work with, just so that, we made sure that, again, that we were covering all the bases and trying to bring the best resources we can to the table when it comes to looking for Molly and Colt.
What wells did you, and the ones on Lease Road, you said you went and checked?
I personally was not part of checking any wells.
Okay.
I know that there were some wells that were searched. I think that they dropped cameras down inside some wells and some things like that. And I know. Was
that your team that did it, or was it law enforcement?
I think that was Tim Miller and his people that did that. Because at that time, we were still new at this. We were just boots on the ground at that time. And other people were organizing and planning. And since that time, I've been to as many classes as I can go to, many training programs that we can go to, again, travel the United States to get the best training out there to do this kind of stuff. So at that time, that, all that technology and all that stuff that was on, like I said, I don't know if it was Klein and their people who were doing that, or if that was Tim Miller and his people that were doing that. I remember hearing people talking about it, but it wasn't something that I was part of it. At that time, I was a ground pounder stomping through the woods, looking for clues, shoulder to shoulder with people on both sides, and doing what we call a grid line search, where we select an area and we all line up, and we literally look at every inch of ground in a given area to make sure that there's nothing missed, even the tiniest clue. And, if we find bone, I know there's been a couple times that we found just some pieces of bones out there, and it's not part of a skeleton, and, it's just this random bone out sitting by itself. I have I can text message the forensic anthropologist with the medical examiner's office anytime. Her name is Angela Berg, and she's amazing. But I can put my tape measure next to a bone so that she's got something for scale. I can take a picture of it and send it to her, and she can tell me human or animal. And most times she can tell me what animal it is, just from these bone fragments. Like I said, she's an amazing person, and we're thankful to be able to have access to her the way we do.
That's great. Another question here. So it was about a year after they went missing that you guys deployed and searched that area. That's an awful long time. My question has always been, they were labeled as runaways initially, and then that was quickly dissipated. No one could find them. Why do you think law enforcement didn't do a search like you guys did sooner?
Well, I mainly feel like that because that time the law enforcement in the area would have been the Love County Sheriff, and you just can't do these kinds of massive operations when you've got giant search areas like that without the cooperation of the law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction, because you need cooperation from them. You need cooperation from the property owners. And at that time, all of those property owners, they know who their neighbors are, and they know who their neighbors are connected to. And I think it was fear that these, even, the property owners who did later consent to have their property searched in the beginning were afraid to cooperate with anybody for fear of being targeted by these people or by the sheriff. Like I said, it was well known who was connected to who when all of this went down. And I know that was one of the biggest hurdles to overcome being out there and talking to people when we were out there, was fear. These people were scared of let's call it what it is, crime family, and they did not want to become targets themselves. So it took a long time to garner the cooperation of these people to just get out there and conduct the operation. Because like I said, it's a huge undertaking, and when you've got these large sections of land to cover on top of the natural weather that got in the way of all that, the flooding and stuff that moved everything around and changed the face of what all that stuff would have been like when they actually went missing. And like I said, I feel like the biggest reason that it took so long is that everybody was scared of that Nip family, and everybody was scared of Joe, the sheriff.
Yeah, because at the time that you guys went searching, he was still sheriff.
Yeah.
So he didn't get ousted until, I think, a couple of years later.
So what do you think the problem is now that he's gone?
I think the problem is that they've had time and resources to hide what they've done. You know where the body's buried, and 2 years later, you go to dig it up, it's just going to be a skeleton at that point. Well, a skeleton is a whole lot easier to move than a body. I mean, you can fit I got a replica skeleton in a box that is 10 by 6 by 14, whatever. It's not a very big box, but every bone in the human body is in it. When you have time on your side, you can do a lot of things. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, even to the point where once it's completely decomposed and nothing but a skeleton to deal with, you could put it out in your trash can every week, one bone at a time. And they've had that much time to do that. And so now you would have a skeleton scattered all over the landfill. One bone here, one bone there. There's so many things that could have happened. Like I said, I couldn't speculate on all of them. At this point, it's going to take somebody who knows to speak up.
Exactly.
We agree. Somebody who knows to go, you know what? That could have been my sister or my brother. I deal with these people. My family's involved. You know what I mean? That could have been me. Or somebody who knows, and maybe they're on the wrong side of these people now. Hey, maybe you ought to come speak up and tell what you know and get some protection from them. I don't know. But I think at this point, it's going to take somebody who knows to speak up and tell somebody what they know.
In your professional opinion, do you think that if we were to get on the Nip property, we would find what we're looking for?
It's hard to say. I would sure love to give my dog a shot, and I've got a couple other dogs that I would love to bring and let them have a shot at it as well. I know one of our canines has given a positive, what we call a train final alert on a 100-year-old unmarked grave out on the Oregon Trail. So the grave's location is known, but there's no markings. It's just natural surroundings out there. But 100 years ago, somebody died and they just buried that body right there where it was at. And we've had dogs that are able to accurately locate these 100-year-old graves. Molly's grave hasn't been there that long. If they are buried out there on that property, I feel like our canines would have a good shot at locating them if we can get on the property and search it correctly.
Are you aware that Phil Klein took out another dog out there, and they did find blood pathogen? Dogs alerted on the burn pit area of where they think it's about 700 yards from where the car was abandoned.
Right. So I do know about the burn pit, and that's another thing. I mean, we know that burn pit burned for a month. So if you can keep a continuous fire in a contained area for that length of time, you can pretty much burn anything. And we know now that that's all been buried. I know when we went back out there, it seems like maybe the last time or the time before last, maybe it was the time before last. It was the time we went out that I had to wear body armor. We came in from that side, and every bit of that has all been re-landscaped in ponds and grass and fields, and beautiful people who ended up buying that property later have completely transformed it. I mean, unless somebody has a good GPS coordinates on where that burn pit actually was, it's going to be difficult to find again. But no, I was not aware that any canines had come out and given a positive alert at that burn pit. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Phil Klein, ironically, he used somebody that we've used in some of our true crime documentaries, Trace Sargent, who's federally approved. She's got amazing dogs that have worked with us before.
Who is it?
Trace Sargent.
Okay, that's not a name I've heard of. But...
Yeah, I should connect you with her. She's in Georgia. She's based in Georgia.
Okay, so yeah, some of my other teammates, one of the ones that went to train in Georgia, might know her. In other cases, these folks, they brag about what they do. Even if you weren't there, if you spent any time with Con Nip or that family, you've heard people talk. They know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people know, and they just aren't saying anything. Yeah. And it's time. It's time to say something. Oklahoma has, as far as based on population and unresolved missing persons cases, we're one of the highest in the country if you figure it per capita. We have the most missing persons cases per population. I don't know what it is per 100,000 or whatever, but I know we're up there at the top. As mostly rural as we are, and really only 2 large metropolitan areas in the state, we are way above where we should be with these unresolved missing persons cases.
Wow.
And part of the reason that we do what we do is family members, unrecovered missing persons, commit suicide at 15 times the national average. If you have a loved one who is missing and their body has never been recovered, never been found, don't know where they are, don't even know where to look, you are 15 times more likely to commit suicide than the rest of the population. And that's a huge number. I mean, when you think 15, not 15%, it's 15 times the national average. If the national average was 10 per 100,000 for unrecovered missing persons, it'd be 150 per 100,000. It's an exponential increase. These people need to be found, and nobody should have to pay for that kind of service. That's why we do what we do for free. I work to pay for this. Literally, that's all. What do you spend your money on? I spend my money on SAR dogs, SAR equipment, and SAR training, and going out and searching. We just recently, we've had a couple of searches recently for the folks at the Wichita Mountain Wildlife Refuge. We had a missing hiker situation and a missing person situation out on Mount Scott a couple weeks ago. So, we respond to that for those folks, and had quite a bit. We've had success out there as well. We're 2 for 2 on our missing persons calls out in the refuge. That family, it didn't cost them anything. It didn't cost the sheriff. It didn't cost the refuge. Cost nobody anything for us to come out and do what we can do.
It's awesome. It's awesome work you're doing.
It really is.
That's fantastic.
Well, you're a great human. So thank you for the work that you do, because it's amazing. We appreciate all the stuff you've done for Paula, and we're hoping that you can find a tip to where we can kind of bring you out and help us again and help Paula, because that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to kind of bring a resolution to this case and bring both Molly and Colt home. And yep. But we thank you for all your efforts and what you're doing for missing persons, and appreciate the time.
No problem at all. You guys are welcome to reach out to us anytime. There's a search for Molly. We're going to be there.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
We're going to be releasing new information in recordings that have never been heard before. We will also be talking to more power players in the legal field who will help us unravel the clues about what happened to Molly and Colt.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
For any tips relating to the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, please contact 833-4-MOLLY and Colt, and they will be directed to the proper law enforcement agency.
All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.